The last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has died at the age of 91.
He was perhaps one of the most influential reformers in his time. Gorbachev is credited with helping end the Cold War and eventually breaking up the Soviet Union.
But he's also recognized for his later years in the lecture circuit. Gorbachev became a strong supporter of protecting the environment and remained a strong and sometimes critical voice in Russian politics.
We want to welcome in Dr. Stephen Sabol, a professor of history at UNC Charlotte. Dr. Sabol, thanks so much for being here with us this morning.
My pleasure.
You are well versed in Russian history, published books, taught courses. How do you sum up Mikhail Gorbachev's legacy?
I would say one of the most consequential figures of the late 20th century. A reformer who faced entrenched institutions in many respects within the Soviet Union. But I would also say he deserves tremendous credit for ending the Soviet-Afghan War, his willingness to relax conditions, if you will, within Eastern Europe, and his willingness to negotiate in good faith with the West, arms reductions, for example. So it's a consequential legacy, but also a very complex legacy, particularly for people within the former Soviet Union.
Well, and some of those freedoms that he fought for there in the Soviet Union, became part of the downfall. And like you were saying, he's loved abroad, but he's loathed at home. It's sort of this dichotomy here of what he left behind. Why is that so polarizing?
I think one of the reasons is that we not only see Gorbachev from this Western prism, right, ending the Cold War, but domestically, it wasn't just the end of the Cold War that the Soviet people faced. It was the complete disintegration of the social system, right? The institutions that they had lived with for a number of decades. We could look on with maybe horror or distaste, but for many Soviets, it was a system they understood. There was a degree of security that accompanied it. But when the system began to collapse of its own sort of negative weight, the black market that had permeated the system, the corruption that had permeated the system, you saw people's life savings wiped out in a matter of hours. You just saw a complete social disruption that we didn't face in the West as a consequence of this, but they had to. And so that's why they fault him. They see him as a failure in many respects, but we see him as a successful political leader.
Will there be much of a celebration or remembrance for Gorbachev?
That's a great question. Certainly Putin's initial comments seem to suggest that there might be some sort of honoring of Gorbachev, but I don't know that it would necessarily be his entire legacy. It would be Gorbachev as the last leader of the Soviet Union, as opposed to any sort of acknowledgement of his role. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there will be, but whether or not it's something that the Russian people want to hear right now, that's the other question.
It's interesting when you look at Vladimir Putin, the two are just so different. Putin is trying to restore Russia to its former glory and beyond. And do you feel like Putin is doing that with Russia now? Do you feel like he's restoring it to the way maybe it used to be before Gorbachev?
To some extent, and I think one of the concerns that many of us have is that there's a large segment of the Russian population that subscribe to his interpretation of history, his interpretation of Russia's greatness. I continue to hear people say that he wants to restore the Soviet Union. It's a notion I disagree with. I tend to believe that what he wants to do is restore what he considers to be Russians' sort of historical territorial integrity. which includes Ukraine and includes perhaps parts of northern Kazakhstan and elsewhere. He doesn't want to restore Kyrgyzstan to the Soviet Union, although I'm sure he wouldn't object to it. But there is a sense among many Russians that the West in the post-Cold War era has taken advantage of Russia's weaknesses. And so as a consequence, many people subscribe to rhetoric that resonates with their thinking about the world.
I was reading an article 3 years back or so before his death. Gorbachev warned of the U.S. and Russia entering kind of a new Cold War era. Was he kind of foreshadowing, not saying that we are there right now, but certainly tensions are at an all-time high?
I think he was reading the tea leaves that many of us have seen over certainly the last decade and a half. We tended to perceive the era right after Gorbachev as one of, the opportunities for democracy to perhaps take root, for popular political participation to actually be meaningful within Russia. But the relationship changed dramatically after the Iraq War, and it certainly changed dramatically after the 2011 elections in Russia, in which the United States was extremely critical of the corruption associated with Putin's victory. And so I think that what Gorbachev was doing was, really remarking about things that many people were seeing. And so I don't know that he was foreshadowing it as much as he was basically issuing a cautionary warning, not just to the West, but also to the Russian people.
Gorbachev won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 1990. He had this relationship with President Reagan that we've been watching the video and seeing these pictures. These relationships, what can we learn about Gorbachev today? Maybe something that we can take from him and these relationships he had with other world leaders.
Gorbachev was an extremely charismatic figure, and certainly Margaret Thatcher, when she told President Reagan that this is somebody that we can work with, Reagan used to say he'd love to meet with a Soviet leader, but they kept dying on him. Well, Gorbachev was relatively young. He was in his mid-50s. Again, very dynamic, very articulate. But he also understood that the stagnation that had occurred during the Brezhnev era was something that had severely weakened the Soviet Union, and certainly the Soviet-Afghan War was something that he had to contend with while in power. And he did so ultimately successfully by withdrawing by 1989. I think what we have to recognize with Gorbachev is he was also not a product of the revolution in the way that Brezhnev and previous Soviet leaders were before him, but he was a product of the Second World War, and he understood the dangers of the arms race. And so as a consequence, he was a far more flexible political leader, because he didn't have the same sort of legacy that he was dealing with as a youth, if you will. He had the Second World War. He understood the extraordinarily dangerous, destructive nature of it, and I think that influenced a lot of his thinking.
Well, and that's certainly something a lot of people and world leaders keep in mind. Dr. Stephen Sabol from UNC Charlotte, a professor of history, we certainly appreciate you joining the show and sharing your insight, and I imagine you've got a topic to teach in class today.
I absolutely do.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.